There's a path to who you want to be, but along the way, we're going to commit to doing it together, and you're going to care for each other. Like, that dynamic is a deep part of the male psyche and the currency of men. But I don't think it's the default setting for most situations that boys or men enter.
I want young men to know, definitely when I was in the classroom and now that I work on the outside, is that you can be kind, you can be caring, you can be loving, you can be gentle.
What I was able to, I think, successfully do over time was to put aside the messages that we as teachers needed to deliver until we had confidently developed a relationship, one that was rooted in deep trust and care and mutual respect. And once we had that, then we could begin doing the work we needed to do.
Welcome to another episode of the Education Matters podcast. So a few weeks ago, I spoke at the Mental Health Summit in Banff, Alberta, along with my friend Adam Turnbull. We actually met at the summit last year, forged a friendship, and found ourselves discussing, amongst many other things, the importance of mental health specifically for boys and men. After sharing and reading a few works together, including Richard Reeves' book of mental health and men, and the poet Robert Bly's book, Iron John, a book about men, Adam and I decided that it would make for a good introductory talk at the summit. So, to make a long story short, today's podcast was quite literally part of my prep for that talk. This episode of Education Matters is going to be part of a broader series where I'll explore issues facing men and boys and how they're doing, what they're experiencing, and what schools can do to better respond to the growing mental health challenges affecting them. This is certainly a topic that deserves far more attention than it's currently getting, and given the reaction from our talk, it's one that I feel people are really ready to have. So for today's podcast, I'm joined by three people who have spent years working closely with boys and men, each from a different vantage point. And more than that, to me, they're incredible examples of healthy masculinity, and I want to spotlight that, because it's not something we talk about enough. The first guest that I'll introduce is Christian Long. He's a guide and facilitator. More formally, he's an educator and designer, and the founder of Bonfire Consultancy, where he works with leaders and teams to create the conditions for people to thrive in school. He's more recently launched his Good Men initiatives, which are immersive experiences designed to foster deeper connection and more honest conversations among men. The next guest joining us today is Ashanti Branch, and he is the founder and executive director of the Ever Forward Club and creator of the global Million Mask movement. He's a Fulbright Fellow and 4-time TEDx speaker. His work has been featured at South by Southwest, on CNN's This Is Life with Lisa Lang, and on The Kelly Clarkson Show. In 2023, he received the U.S. Surgeon General's Medallion, one of the highest civilian honors awarded in public health, for his impact supporting young people and the adults who work with them. And the third guest that is part of this roundtable is someone who played an important role in my life. Dominic Scuglia is a veteran educator and former superintendent of 2 school districts in Saskatchewan and Ontario. His decades of leadership in schools and on the field as a coach have centered on building trust, belonging, and character in young people. Our conversation covers topics such as mentorship, models of masculinity, what boys are lacking, how we can better support boys in schools, and what it would look like for schools to take this work seriously. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Christian Long, Dominic Scuglia, and Ashanti Branch. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. This is one I've been looking forward to doing for quite a while. And unlike most of my other podcasts where we kind of get some background, folks, I think we'll do that as we go, but I will have pre-recorded an intro here that give folks a sense of your backgrounds, but maybe for some context for this one, because it's something a little bit different. We want to be talking today about issues and support for boys and men. And the basis of this conversation is some work I've been doing into the topic and using someone that the four of us are familiar with, in Richard Reeves, who really has done some great research and given us some empirical data as to why we need to focus and discuss what's happening, I think in particular to young boys and manhood, or men in general. And I just want to start the podcast, just give some statistics to folks, but then really want to dive into your individual background and the experience you have in working with boys and men, because I think that'll be really useful for this audience. So by way of intro, some of the stats that Reeves provides us with are pretty outstanding. Like something, let's see if I get this right. I think 7 out of every 10 bachelor degrees now are being earned by women. Men are more than 3 times as likely to die from deaths of despair, and that includes suicide and drug overdose. Suicide rates for young boys and men is on the rise, an alarming rate of 4 times that of girls and women. And those numbers are all far worse for those at the poverty line, and Black men in particular. So as I mentioned, for our conversation today, I don't necessarily want to dive into this data further. I just wanted to use that as a context, and I'll refer folks to Reeves' work, where he does a really wonderful job in collecting and analyzing this empirical data. And really to suggest this conversation is probably long overdue, and we want to put a point of emphasis for the folks in the education space that can impact this work. And I also wanted at the start to point out, as Reeves does, that this conversation really isn't a zero-sum game between women's rights and the support for an awareness of what's happening to men. So what I'd like to do is have a discussion with the 3 of you about your work, your experiences, and what it's like to be working with boys and men today, and give us all a place to have that discussion. So with that, Ashanti, I think I'd like to start with you and just hear a little bit about the work that you're doing with boys. I know you've been doing it for a long time, but can you start by telling us about, the experiences that you've had in working with young boys in particular?
Yeah, thank you. And, yesterday, this past week, I was in Fresno for a youth conference, and thank goodness that I get a chance, on the ground, to kind of be doing the work. Maybe if I was a smarter entrepreneur, I would have hired a bunch of facilitators that would go out and take this work to the world. But I love it a lot, and I'm doing a lot of the workshops in action. And in our last workshop, we did 4 in a row. The last session was really small and intimate, and there was 2 young men in there, and what stood out to me right away was they were friends, so they knew each other. I was asking for a volunteer, and one of the young men volunteered his friend. I'm like, well, you can't volunteer someone else. You got to volunteer yourself. But what happened in that space was when I got back home and I looked at those masks that those young men created, when they just, in the room, they were really clear. Like, you could tell this idea of, how do I share about what's going on with me? Some of the groups were a lot bigger. So this one had to happen to be small, kind of intimate space. But the other ones where the young men could easily hide, these 2 couldn't really hide because they were literally right here in front of me. But when I got to those masks, when they shared what things they don't talk about, one of the young men said, I really need to cry. I need to share how I'm feeling. He said, I'm tired of taking on other people's responsibilities. And he said, the third thing he said was, I wish I could talk about what was really going on. And look, this is a middle schooler. I don't think I had the language in my mind that I knew I needed to cry. If you asked me if I'd ever had the opportunity to tell you, I'm like, I ain't crying. I know. I was giving you some names of what they call boys who cry in my community. But to have this middle schooler in a space where we get to give them room to explore, I think they're hungry for a place where they can feel full range of emotions. But oftentimes, definitely many communities are different, but many young men around the country, around the world, are taught, suck it up, man up, stoic, don't feel, don't let anybody see your feelings. And if you have them, you may have one a good friend that you can talk about it with, but don't cry too much. Don't get too soft, right? We can talk about it a little bit, but we have to caveat everything with no homo to pretend to prove to other men around us that even though I'm talking about something sensitive, that doesn't challenge my masculinity. And now they have a new word. No homo doesn't exist too much anymore. They say pause. So if you say anything that's potentially going to sound like you're not a real man, you say the word pause and it lets everybody know, oh no, I'm still a man. I just had a moment of pause to let you see some more of my humanity. And I think that regardless of what generation we deal with, young men and men they know the stories they were told in their own communities. And I think they're just hungry. And so I think what I get to see each day and each time we do these workshops is that, well, if we pay attention as a former educator, as an administrator, and now as a person working on the outside of schools, if we pay attention, I think the young people are wanting to tell us. But if we're too busy thinking about the tests and the scores and the standardized information, then we could easily just be like, oh, there's a big problem. And so I just think that there's a lot of hunger for young people, definitely young men, to have a space safe to talk about what's really going on behind what everyone has to see on the outside.
Ashanti, what are the things that you think they feel they need to hide the most? What are the common things that you find?
I mean, what I notice them hiding is any image, any idea that they're not real men. Now, it depends on the age of when your community or society. At 7 years old, my uncle told me I was the man of the house. And I was still trying to figure out this boy thing. And he's giving me this new set of responsibilities. That was like, you are the man of the house. Take care of your mom and your sister and your brother. And I'm like, can you just pick me up again and throw me in the ceiling like you usually do? I'm not sure what's up with all these new responsibilities. I don't want them. They don't sound fun. And it's kind of messing up our relationship here, Uncle. Can you go back to the play to be the fun uncle? And I realized in that moment, our relationship shifted, And so I think they're hearing a lot of messages and maybe in different words from different people, but they're definitely hearing the message that, oh, you can't show these things. You can't, because if you do, and then the people can question your manhood, then who are you? I mean, and then what are you? Are you categorized into the people who don't know who they are? Are you categorized into the people who, all the ways that our young men get pigeonholed into the bodies they were born in to be this is how you have to act. And I think that sometimes that is, but you're always living up to somebody else's definition of it because you don't get to create your own. So therefore, even though there's, if you just, on average, there's 4 billion men, 4 billion women, or however you use those numbers, there's so many different ways of showing up as a man in the world, right? I don't have to like sports, right? But I've been on a plane once where the guy asked me, oh, you're from Oakland? You must like the Raiders. And I was like, no, not really. I don't watch football. And he was like, I felt his energy shift. I'm on a plane with 200 people. I felt this man who did, as I say a statement to him about my story, he was like, what? I'm like, you don't watch football? I mean, I'm a big dude, right? So I think he at first was like, aren't you a football player? No, I'm not, first of all. But not to mention, not that I don't like football. It's just I was just in a moment of being honest, I don't really watch it. And that moment of oh, he's judging me. And I was like, this is going to be a long flight, or it's going to be a very quiet flight. So one way or the other, I knew even as an adult what happens when you don't live up to other people's expectations of you. And definitely I remember when I was 7 trying to figure that out from my uncle,
Well, so I'll turn this question to Christian in a second, because I know Christian does work similar to yours, but with grown men that are looking for men's groups and different ways of expressing themselves and different ways of bonding with each other. But I just want to linger on that for a second more and then pose the question to Christian, because as I mentioned to the three of you when we first met, I have first ballot Hall of Fame father who's a poet, a philosopher, who's always very expressive with his feelings. And I used to proudly say, into my, well into my adulthood, that that Chuck Norris joke, my tears can cure cancer, but I never cried a day in my life. So I'm just wondering what it is about our culture to this point and about us that masculinity was wrapped up in this notion of the kind of Clint Eastwood persona of being rough and tough and not showing emotion. Christian, anything from your work that could shed light on that?
I'll kind of situate like sitting maybe across the aisle on the same plane and trying to imagine two men who all they have in common, moment one, is they're sitting beside each other and they're being civil and a little bit of, kind of placemaking for one another. And if all goes well, at the very least, sat next to a good guy. It's a good people, good dude, right? Like that's what sits as potential. The downside, like, God, I can't believe my shoulder has to be within a quarter inch of this guy. Like he's not my kind of people. I don't trust him, right? I mean, that's what's sitting there. And what strikes me is that what both men deserve, and I don't put words in your mouth or your heart, Ashanti, but what both men deserve, besides to know they're going to be okay, right? They're going to be safe. They're not going to be bothered. Like that's fair. But the other side of it is curiosity. Like, is there something about this individual that makes me curious? And vice versa. Is there something about my story that makes him curious? And for me, that's the sweet spot when men come together without regard of the role or the setting, is whether society directly or subconsciously and indirectly guides how close we sit or whether or not we quickly run radar over that guy. Like there's a lot of things human beings do when they greet somebody new. Depending upon culture, we might stand this close and be perfectly at peace with a stranger. Another culture, we get within 3 feet and one person's already backing up, right? So there's a lot that goes into that. But let's just say both men are familiar, same relative dynamic. Armrest sits as a little bit of armor between both of them, and they could both turn their head and ignore the other guy. Society says it's fine. What I long for, Jason, in as many situations as possible, most of them the ones I'm a participant in, forget the ones I facilitate, is how do we create the conditions so we can be curious about one another? And this part 2 for me has become more and more critical, not so that I can come to a clear outcome. I don't want to find out if Ashanti plays ball, loves the Raiders, whatever, so that I can package him. I want to find out so he can take me somewhere. I know that's what I long for as a human being in my family, the neighbors, strangers on an airplane. And as a guy, there's a lot of things we do to approximate that curiosity, approximate that comfort, approximate getting close, but not quite close. We got great one-liners. We got real quick, like we can sort of like, you know what I mean? Like, women, right? Like we sort of use any phrase as a setup for the phrase right. And it strikes me that what we miss, and I'll just put it in terms of men, but I don't think it's purely gender-based. I think we miss the opportunity to say, tell me more about that. And I think that is intellectual and conversational, but I think it also affects us somatically. It affects us in terms of like whether we lean in or lean back into a relationship, into being together in a place. It also shifts our ability to sense danger, threat, risk versus opportunity, ally, love, whatever it might be, like whatever the energy is, it feels positive. So I'll just come back to it. So Ashanti, I've seen a lot of your work and I've seen you and I've collaborated together. Like you do an enormously good job for young boys, adolescents, young men, grown men, and of course, everyone else at inviting them to be curious about each other. The mask is in essence a world-class version of, here's what I'll show you. Are you curious about what I haven't yet shown you? Right. And I think, Jason, what has brought me into, I'll call it men's work of any degree, is I deeply crave feeling connection with other men. I don't want to spend most of my time with them jockeying because of resumes or one-upping each other over stats and specs and opinions. It can do all that, but it never moves me. I never become anything better as a result. And what I realize is I lack the ability to have access to the wisdom, the strength, the power, the possibility of other men. So most of my work comes down to a really simple premise is like, can we create the conditions for men to be curious of one another, but with one another? And I'll just kind of hit pause there.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, that's I think a rare quality in men, generally speaking. The mask metaphor, I think, is that Ashanti uses is a powerful one because it's what you see in the everyday conversations, and it's why sports are so easy, because it's a way to bond, quote unquote, and talk to somebody else maybe about how they grew up, what they did, but it's under the veneer of just something surface, something that's easy to talk about, right? Dom, I have you on this podcast for those that don't know that you were influential, super influential in my life, as a mentor, as a guide. And we actually did, and you did help me through a lot of what my struggles were with male bonding, right, directly through sports and being part of a team. Is there anything in your experience, Dom, in terms of when you think boys start putting on this mask, and you know, maybe the reasons why they start to do that at that age or a given age?
Before I get to your question, I just want to say, as both of my colleagues on this podcast were chatting, every single scenario that you were describing brought a real life example of a situation that I experienced as an educator. And so they're real. And, you know, to your question, Jay, I received these students when they were 14, 15 years of age. In my view, with no data to back up what I'm about to say, other than just the experience that I've had with them, that mask is already formed. It's there. And what I was able to, I think, successfully do over time was to, you know, put aside the messages that we as teachers needed to deliver until we had confidently developed a relationship, one that was rooted in deep trust and care and mutual respect. And once we had that, then we could begin doing the work we needed to do on the rugby field or the basketball court or whatever it was, because it was about getting those boys to love each other, trust each other, and know that they're going to have their back in a competition. And once we got there, we started having lots of success. And I mean, I could get into specific examples. At one point, I'm going to sit down and write a book just on some of these things.
Dom, I'd love to ask you a quick question. And Jason, I know you've got a lot to follow. You mentioned you kind of paired this idea of like for a young boy, say 13, 14, 15 years old, 16 years old, to love a teammate, because in that world, they might be buddies, but they're definitely teammates. You paired this idea of to love my teammate and to compete. And I'm wondering, and this is a very generic question, I'm just curious where you go with it. Does a boy, in your experience on a team dynamic, have to compete in order to learn to love and trust? Or can they be taught or supported to love and trust as they compete, or even in advance of that, in that kind of like athletic rugby locker room kind of dynamic?
That's an interesting question, Christian, because the nature of the way sports are set up, it's that we're going to have a winner and we're going to have a loser. And so I always approached it from the premise that, you know, boys, in order for us to achieve our outcome, which is to win that competition against our opposition, we have to be all on the same page, and we have to trust each other. We have to love each other. And so, you know, I think, you know, the competition piece, it was central to the work we did, because it was through that and rugby was just really the vehicle that we used to get to the end goal. None of my boys my players, my students ended up, or very few of them ended up pursuing any kind of career in rugby, but they became very successful adults. And the skills that they learned through that sport and that competition and those relationships, in my view, made them better people and human beings. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
I just appreciate where you took it. Thank you, Dom.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting question though, Christian, because for me the two are inextricably linked. I think I'm one of those folks that just genetically loves to compete, like no matter what we're doing, and so that was built into what I love so much about sports. But the pieces that on the rugby team in particular was that it was our time together with. I mean, how many kids were on that team, Don? They were huge teams, right? Like we had 25 plus kids.
Upwards of 30 kids. I mean,
right.
My philosophy, sorry to cut you off, Jason, was I never cut a kid. Anybody who wanted to come out and wanted to be part of the team, they were part of the team. There were no here's the list of guys who made it and here's the guys who didn't. And we all understood that, everybody was going to get some playing time, but some are going to get a little more playing time than others. And if we're good with that, then you're all staying on the team.
Yeah. And maybe we can come back to sports, because I do think there is something in especially in rugby or football, the physicality of the sports that allowed us to bond in a different way. But that, I have friends that a good number of them were also musicians, right? They never played rugby and they all bond in a similar way, but emotionally, but through a very different medium. In any of the work you do, what do you guys see as, whether it's sport or music, as potential door openers for men to bond in a way, in what we would describe as a healthy way, and maybe even if you're open to describing what male bonding in a healthy way actually looks like, because I don't think there's a real roadmap for that we're really taught in school or taught along the way.
Yeah, I want to jump in because I think, when I started the Ever Forward Club, I was a first-year teacher. There were these brilliant young men who were failing algebra. I knew that algebra was a gatekeeper. And here in California, if you don't pass algebra, you don't get a high school diploma. So for these 14-year-old ninth graders who knew everything already, they didn't know that the rules from middle school to high school changed. Because in middle school, you can technically fail every class in middle school, and they're not holding you back. But once you transition over from that 8th grade to 9th grade, the rules change 100%. Like, you don't pass classes, you don't move on. And I think that what I saw with these young men who were brilliant was that there was something in the way. Like, I could tell they were brilliant. I could tell that they were smart. But they were always measuring smarts by how many points they got on a test or a quiz or whatever, as opposed to like they had just charisma, they had connection, they had the gift of gab. And because school doesn't measure you like that, everything they were always doing was getting them low scores. So they always thought they were bad at school. And I'm like, dude, you're brilliant. What are you talking about? And I think that what I had to learn with them was, okay, as a math teacher, I would have a young man who would rather me kick him out of class than for me to say in front of the class how smart he was. I mean, I've had a kid like square up against me because I told him to take out his pencil for the 5th time. And he's like, man, you better get out my face. And I'm like, what is going on with you? Like the basic request, and in my classroom, I'm in charge. I mean, maybe there's some new philosophy that I've adopted, along the way. But when I was a teacher, when I'm Mr. Branch, Ashanti Branch, and I'm not Ashanti, but to you, by the way, I'm Mr. Branch. That's how we're gonna do it. Like I'm a little old school and I'm a little young, but you ain't calling me by my first name. I ain't there yet. And if I tell you to take out your pencil, my expectation is you're just gonna do it. Like there shouldn't even be a negotiation. But what I saw young men do who were brilliant would be rather me do something that would make me kick them out than to adjust their desires to what the teacher wants. Now, when I started the Ever Forward Club, I wasn't thinking I was starting a nonprofit. I mean, I just became a teacher from becoming an engineer. I was like, you can't go more nonprofit than teaching. You know what I mean? Like, but what I realized was that when I started bringing those young men together in these circles, I didn't even know what to do because I had never done it myself. I wasn't even on a men's team myself at that time. I didn't even know that men's team existed. I just knew that something was telling me that what I needed to do for them couldn't be done in the classroom with everybody around. I didn't have the capacity to bring them together one-on-one every day for an hour. So I'd say, look, you're going to come together once a week. I'm going to buy you lunch. I'm going to feed you, and we're going to have some real talk. And I think that what I think oftentimes is that if you've never seen it happen, if you've never seen that opening up can be positive, why would you do it? If you've never seen that being honest about how you really feel can be respected, why would you do it? So I think that they've been trained by society that says, hey, nobody in my family ever talks about how they feel. Everyone got a job. Everyone has a car. Everyone has money in their pocket or whatever they have. Maybe they don't have as much as they want, but they're surviving. And I think that if you've never seen it possible, if you've never seen it work, you could easily believe that, what was Mr. Branch asking me to come to this circle to talk about stuff? I had one young man, he got invited by one of his friends. He walked in the room. We're having pizza. There's beverages or snacks. He walks in, he looks around, and he's like, where are the girls? And I'm like, you were invited to a young men's circle. There are no girls here. And he needed to, in this room that he had just walked into for the first time, he needed to prove to all the other young men in this room that his desire was only to be around girls. And so not only, but he, like, to walk in a room like, what's this? Now, no one in the room is tripping because we've been doing it for weeks and months. Like, this is not new to us. Every week, Thursday at lunch, we here with Branch having lunch, talking about real stuff. But he came in as a guest and he had to put on this show. And I just remember, like, wow, like having to be careful not to take it personal, not trying to like shame him or downplay his thoughts, but really with caring and love and say, hey, brother, hey, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. And I don't want to waste your time, but this is a space for us to be real. And so, you can go back outside where everyone else is. That's okay. But we're here to like have a space for ourselves. And I think that he was, first of all, in some shock. He didn't stay as a part. He stayed that day. But I think he was just never had seen it. He never seen it being possible that young men could be together in a healthy way. And so I think that opportunity of seeing it lets you believe that it can happen safely. It can happen without judgment. And I think that's what we had to do, every year, as new young men came in and other young men transitioned, it was an opportunity for them to see, wow, this is so powerful that we're not here no one's making fun of each other. No one's capping on each other. No one's talking about each other's mamas or their shoes or their hair. Like we're building a place where I get to be human and be respected for the way I live human in this body, I think that's the beauty of it. And I think that I was trying to create what I had never seen. It wasn't until maybe 2010, 6 years later, when I sat in my first men's circle and I'm like, what is this? I mean, like, I had never seen it. So I was also I wasn't worried about where the women were, but I was like, oh my God, this is happening. And I think that's what so many men have never sat in a circle with men who could take off those masks, put down the armor for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and get real.
Ashanti, what does that look like when they start to open up, when they get over that, let's call it culture shock, because we haven't facilitated these kind of opportunities like formally as part of the education system. What does it look like when they start to open up? What kind of gets them thinking about the group and the sharing and the emotions in a different way?
I think it's when that first young man who everyone on the outside saw has wearing Jordans, always got the most stylish stuff, got 2 girlfriends, plays 3 sports. When they see that young man say, my mom and dad are always fighting, I hate going home. Like when they get to see the story that they have been told themselves about this person being perfect because of the exterior, the muscles, the exterior bravado that they have measured each other by, realizing that person has way more chaos and challenge going on than anybody could ever imagine. I think it begins to settle in that, oh, wow, like I made up a story. I made up a story about that person having a perfect life, having a perfect existence, because I looked at all the accessories on the outside and not realizing that that person was also human going through stuff that I could never know. And I think that's what began to happen. Is like, oh, wow, maybe I can be honest about what I'm going through. Like I thought that everybody here was perfect. So I thought I was just going to come in here and keep on this perfect show. And even though I didn't know, I had never created this before, I was like, oh my goodness. They began to trust each other. They began to like, oh, okay. And then it became normal. Like it became normal that when we do check-ins, no one's afraid to say, I'm struggling in this class over here. Because they know that what my job as Branch is here to say, hey, who's passing that class? Anybody has that class? Who took that class last year? You got that? Okay. Can you meet up with him after school and help him with that? Absolutely. Like, and it began like this idea that when I let go of that, I'm trying to do it by myself. I don't have to do it by myself. But if I keep it to myself, I have the right to keep it to myself. And there's no help possible because no one is going to come fill a gap that you don't let them know that is there, you know? And so I think that's what ends up happening is that trust builds, the confidence builds, and the reality that I was never meant to have it all figured out by myself. That's what we're supposed to be doing, this life with each other and connected. That's what I found. And that's what I keep seeing.
Well, and so Christian, if you can now let us lean on your experience. So Ashanti's kind of getting them and working with these kids, obviously at crucial stages when they're in their adolescence. You're dealing with them more in middle age, right? I know obviously you do work with schools too, but in the men's work that you do, did you find similar experiences? Like folks are just longing to be with a group of men that are honest about what's going on and then receptive to their honesty about what they're dealing with?
Yeah, your use of longing, I think Ashanti, he's mentioned a young man's hunger for X, right? I think there is this craving, and it doesn't require deep vulnerability, it doesn't require heavy language, but I think there's always this desire to be known, to be, for somebody to hold ground for you. I think for men, the idea that I can hold my ground, but also to be in a circle, in a team dynamic, in a friendship, in a group, in a lunch meeting that leads to something much more impactful, like to have others hold ground for us so we can be 100% our awkward selves, our figuring shit out selves, like we're just like, we might hide behind humor, we might sort of like jockey for attention, but we're also testing. We're trying to figure out whether or not in this relationship, in this dynamic, on this team, in this family, like how much of me can show up. So I think that longing, Jason, is true. I think I don't know that I have any unique insight that the three of you wouldn't have in terms of being with your contemporaries, adults of whatever age. I think let's just say at a certain point in time, men learn to figure out how to enter the space. Like how to sit at the table, how to shake the hand of a neighbor, how to kind of like show up in some kind of crowd situation. Like guys kind of have their way of approaching it. And in that process, I think what I find myself really fascinated by is before you try to change a guy's behavior, orientation, or contributions, it's like, what does he do intuitively so he can get grounded? He can sort of find his footing. And I'm fortunate enough to have guys come together, and sometimes it'll be virtually, but my preferred is we're out on trail together. We literally get out of cars, meet outdoors, get on a trail, and it could be a couple hours, it could be for 5 days, on more of an immersive retreat. And I find joy in watching how men arrive at the circle, or arrive, whether they're first or fifth or the last guy in. And there's all these subtle things that show up, their body language, pace, kind of like their facial expressions. If they recognize somebody, there's this kind of going towards because they're trying to find an anchor. And I think in some respects, that's our middle school boy. That's just that boy who is trying to figure out, is there somewhere on the playground that somebody will play with me? Is there a place in the classroom where I can like figure out if I'm okay before comment? Can I be a little bit who I am over here, or do I have to be something totally different when I come over this way? And I find with men that when in doubt, we tend to, men in general, I'm going to be wrong the moment I come up with an example, we tend to rely on external opinions in order to figure out who my people are, who my boys are. So sports is a great facilitator, politics, not always a great one, but a facilitator. You know, a one-liner, a punchline, kind of like, yo, I see you wearing it again. You know, it's like we just have this quick little ability to put something out there to watch how people react. And I think men do that a lot because I'm trying to figure out my place in the circle, the tribe, the group, the moment. And I was thinking about, Dom, what you started with, like as a coach, to have the privilege of coaching and mentoring, guiding young boys, young men. That dynamic, I realized as I look back in time, I didn't have a single coach. I was a varsity athlete in multiple sports. Sports was my identity until I realized it didn't fulfill me. But I never had a coach that created anything close to what you hinted at, or Jason, what I tried to do as a varsity coach or as a summer camp counselor coach, whatever it might be. But I know that if there's a coach or a man like you that purposefully tries to create the conditions so that we're going to go that way together, and along the way, you're going to learn to care about one another. And Ashanti, I think it's not athletics, but what you've created in dozens of clubs and workshops and assemblies is a variation on that. And I think that's done in music. I think it's done in theater. I think it's done in a Voc Tech shop. I think there are lots of situations about an elder, a guide who creates the conditions. Come this way. There's a path to who you want to be, but along the way, we're going to commit to doing it together, and you're going to care for each other. Like that dynamic is a deep part of the male psyche and the currency of men. But I don't think it's the default setting for most situations that boys or men enter. And so I don't think it's about sports or music or trust falls or whatever it might be. I think it's like, what is the recipe? What is the combination of things? And how does a young boy, how does an experienced leader show up and find his footing, and then little by little begin to create the potential to be known, whether it's for attributes and skills, decision-making, strength, charisma, whatever, or until I trust you, I can't give you access. But once I do, I'll give you me, and vice versa. So that's what you all have me thinking right now.
So I think that's a great segue into one of the main things I wanted to discuss with you all, because I can tell, obviously, with Dominic, I have direct, experience with him being a mentor for me. But you two are already mentors for me in the several conversations we've had, and I can tell you're just folks that I want to learn from. I've also had almost innately built in, as I mentioned, my dad and uncles had really great. I always sought mentors, so it was very easy for me to do, and I still do it in my everyday life, and some of my great friendships come from that. But why do boys, I think, sometimes struggle to find mentors? And then maybe let me ask you the broader question of what does good mentorship look like? And if I can take just another quick second to premise all of this into something that I found very interesting. And I know some of his work, I actually don't know why it can be sort of polarizing, but the poet Robert Bly had what I think is a wonderful work called Iron John, where he looked at the myth of Iron John and how he used it as a template. See, I got the heart tap from Ashanti, so I know I'm on a good track here. But Bly's work I just found fascinating in many ways as someone with a literature background, but also something that really stood out to me when I read it, and it was that for time immemorial, we had rituals to enter into manhood. And let's call it, generally speaking, in modern society, modern life, 20th century, what I meant maybe a little further back than that, we've lost these rituals where you go from boyhood to manhood. And part of that ritual was always a guide, a mentor. And so we've, for I think a number of reasons, have that broken cultural piece. How do we repair that? How do we think about that? How do mentors that want to be mentors step into that space?
Yeah, I love this topic. I love the topic of rites of passage. And thank you for the question, because I didn't have a rites of passage growing up. Oh, I did. In Oakland, the rites of passage were very different, right? It wasn't definitely not a guide. Well, you had a guide, but the guy was probably younger than you, or the guide learned it from another. So you got the 17-year-olds teaching the 14-year-olds, and the 17-year-olds learned it from another 18-year-old. And so you imagine you got a recipe for disaster when the Lord of the Flies happens, a story, right? Like, I'm gonna be in charge, and this is what makes me in charge. And if you don't like it, then I'm gonna make you realize why I should be in charge. And then others were going to defend that honor because they don't afraid of who said they're in charge. And sometimes the person in charge is not the person making the most honorable, wise decision, but whoever has the power in that moment, whether it's the bigger muscles and the bigger bravado or the bigger voice, or perhaps they pay for all the food for everybody, so everyone follows them because they got the money, right? And so all that to say, like, rites of passage, I think for me and for what I see in young people today, the desire of what does it mean to be a man. If you ask young men, we ask them a lot, what does it mean to be a man? You're responsible, you got a job, you got money, you got a car, you got girls. It's the stuff. Now, they may use the word responsible, which is not necessarily stuff, but they're limited what responsible is around that, right? Oh, you're responsible because you get up and go to work so you can buy your car and have more money and more girls and more. So they have this circular thing around what it means to be a man that oftentimes is just rooted in the stuff they see on either the devices or the stuff they've seen in people in their life. And so who are you following? And so, which in the manosphere that we see young men get sucked into, the Tates and the blah blah blahs and the people with all the money, and like, oh, I'll teach you how to be a real man. You pay me $49.95, and I'm gonna show you how to be a real man, and I'm gonna teach you until ever, because you need to pay me forever. And even when you stop trying to pay me, I'm gonna tell you how much you're not gonna be a man anymore, because I was your ticket. And I think that what happens in our social media world is that our young people, and definitely young men, have been trained that this is how you live up to this model. Oh, you better have a girl giving you money. That's how you become a real man. You can't be giving a girl money. Don't be no simp. And so now being a man who buys a girl's stuff is seen as weak, because your job is to make the girl buy you stuff. And imagine the layers of what we have young men buying into and believing, because they've been taught that by these devices, that they see people with followers. Oh, that must mean he knows he has 50, 20, 30, 100,000 followers. He must know what he's talking about. He must be popular. He's driving around in those kind of cars. He's living in those kind of houses. He's on those kind of planes. And I think the algorithms, the design of those things have done so much more that we're still going to be figuring out for many years in the future. And so for young men who have been taught that, oh, the voices that I listen to who use these hashtags, realize that I watched this thing all the way to the end, it's going to give me more of those things, more of those things. Oh, the people you like who like this also watch this, so let me give you more of that. And because our young people have gotten into a place where there's the guides, the elders are exhausted and tired. I can't compete. I can't compete if I tell you that, hey man, that talking to women like that is not the way you should be talking to women. And you tell me, well, it works for that person and it works for that person. Like, okay, how many more ways of me describing values can I do to you, young man, if you've been bought into the fact that that this person, because I have no followers, I don't even have a social media, for example. I'm saying not me, Ashanti, but an elder man who says, I don't even know what Twitter is.
Right.
And you're like, well, the man on Twitter who has millions of followers said this. So you can't know really what's going on, old man. And I think that what has happened is the rites of passage has shifted to these devices, and young people are finding themselves trying to follow an image that sometimes is even fake. And then they find out too late that that was fake, that the person rented those Lamborghinis and borrowed those cars, and as an Airbnb that you thought was his house, right? And so now you've bought into this and you've been acting out of this way and leaving your real friends behind, following other people. And so I think it's just a new world that they're living in. And I keep asking a lot of questions. I stay curious because I don't want to ever think I know. I just keep asking, what's important to you? What are your values about being a man in this world? Where did you learn this from? Where did that person learn it from? Oh, maybe you should do some homework around that, right? Because now it's not the father and then grandfather and then uncles. Sometimes it's like some random person online that has now caught your ear and your heart and maybe even your soul sometimes, if you believe in that kind of deeper thinking. But I think we have a lot of work to do. Us older men who care, we have a lot of work to do,
So gentlemen, what does that look like in terms of the intervention? Like, obviously, the school setting, and I think we've all talked about this, and Reeves does a great job, and something that intuitively I understood, that like in elementary school, there's, I think the number is crazy, like 80% women teachers in elementary school. A lot of men don't go into especially elementary school education. That is obviously a point of intervention where we can provide better role models. But Dom, you ran 2 school districts, right, in 2 different provinces. What would that look like? Like, is that something where you need, broader community support and government support to like incentivize men to go into not necessarily early childhood education? You can make an argument for that, but also, especially in those middle school years that I think are incredibly important. And what could that look like, and what kind of things can schools be thinking about implementing in terms of programs or opportunities for exactly this kind of mentorship that Ashanti just really eloquently said is missing, and they're filling the void somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, that's why I stayed 41 years in the sector, because it became the mechanism for attacking and challenging some of those notions that Ashanti just talked about, that kids are being fed through their phones and through their screens and however else they're accessing information. And for me, school was always the place where you could build a community to challenge some of those notions and ideas. And we're definitely, both school boards, Regina Catholic School Board and your Catholic School Board, were intentional about trying to build capacity in putting male role models in the primary junior grades. I don't think I came across a single male kindergarten teacher, I have to say. And if I did, that was definitely a rarity. It's something that's going to change, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take human resources departments going out and being active and encouraging males to go and be present for students, especially male students, in those age groups. Because we started the podcast by saying, when do kids start forming these masks? Well, by the time they came to high school, the masks were already in place. And so if we can start breaking down some of those ideas that kids are fed with in the earlier grades, I think we stand a better chance of challenging some of those societal ideas that they listen to every day on TikTok, on whatever YouTube channel they're listening to. So I'm encouraged that we're going to see a change, Jason, but I don't see it happening like immediately. It's taken years to create the structure that we have right now. And so that kind of change, that messaging is present, and it's just going to take some time. And I think it's necessary. I remember going into a school, and the principal was so proud of the grade 4 teacher who was male. And this male was amazing with those kids, all the kids, but especially the male kids, because the male kids can connect and relate to that individual. And, I think as we talk about mentors, we can't underscore the importance of putting, and it doesn't come by happen chance. We had this conversation earlier when we were prepping for this. You have to be intentional about the kinds of messages you want to deliver to your community of leaders, because that leadership group have such a profound ability to change behavior and change ideas. They're not even aware of it. And it's not until several years later where I've been blessed to be able to stay connected to my students from 30 and 35 years ago and hear how their lives have changed and where they are and the memories that they have and the things that we did that at the time we just did them and weren't aware that they were having an impact on that child. So I'll pause there and let the others chime in.
Jason, can I throw something in right now? And Dom, you reminded me of something is that, some of the bright lights that I see and that I've seen, and definitely as you described those students who 30 years ago, 20, like that you got to work with, I think like I know of some organizations out there that are doing like rites of passage for young men, like Boys to Men, like the Young Men's Ultimate Weekend, like there's probably numerous other organizations that are doing work like that. They're out there. And I think it requires us, because that landscape of the nonprofit organizations requires a lot of work to like get the word out about it. Sometimes it misses the teachers, like you said, that 4th grade teacher, Dom, and like yourself, who is just trying to do good and trying to, I may not have an organization. Like, Dom, you were the coach, you were building it through your heart, soul. And I think before I started the Ever Forward Club, I didn't think I was starting an organization. I thought I was just a teacher who cared a whole lot more than seemingly these other teachers at the school, because no one was noticing what I was seeming to notice. And so I think it's like, sometimes we just got to shine lights on all the spots that are bright, because, sadly, there are so few male teachers who are helping young men and boys in some of these schools who find themselves in the office all the time in trouble because they got a lot of energy that needs to be channeled. And everyone wants them to sit down and be quiet and fold their hands and write neat and say please and thank you and raise your hand before you speak out, and all the ways that I think they get missed. And so highlighting teachers and educators who are just in my classroom, I'm not trying to start an organization, but in my classroom, I'm making space for these young men to be seen, to be highlighted, uplifted. I think it's so important and so valuable. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because I think there are bright lights. I know because I see a lot of the challenges. I talk about a lot of the challenges, but I do see that like teachers like Dom, like I would say teachers like myself, right, who cared more than for a job. It was more than a job or a check. It was, I was trying to like create change.
That's a really powerful statement, because that was a message. I said, this is not a job, it's a vocation. You came into this because you wanted to do something for kids. You wanted to make sure that they were on a good path. So I never talked about teaching as a job. I always talked about it as a vocation. And it was something that came from the heart. And we did it through rugby tours.
So for the teachers that are listening and the education leaders, which make up the lion's share of the audience here, can we describe for them some qualities that would define a healthier version of manhood, of masculinity, that they can be using in how they talk to their leaders and how their leaders talk to like that great male grade 4 teacher that might be doing things, Ashanti, like we did when we were teaching out of instinct, but help them just kind of identify some of these qualities that they can bring out in their young boys?
I mean, one of the things that I see in that is like, I didn't learn till I was teaching already probably 7 years, 8 years. I went to this training called Boys and Girls Learn Differently. It was by a man named Michael Gurian, and it was around my brain science. It was like how many studies have talked about the way boys' brains work and way girls. I mean, this is like obviously generalities, but it's about the stories of like what helps boys learn better. I didn't even know. I never thought about a brain break. I taught 8 years, and my mind, I had never heard of a brain break. The fact that I take a 2-minute or 1 minute moment and say, everyone put the pencils down, books down, jump on the chair, stand up, stretch. I mean, that's so easy to do. But you know how many times I've been trying to get kids to stop wiggling or moving around because I thought that's what you were supposed to do as a teacher. And so I think that's because oftentimes we don't train. We don't help them see that there's a way of learning that looks different. I think I think what we need to help administrators and educators learn is that, look, if it's not working for the boys at your school, to keep doing more of it, it seems to be absurd. To tell a kid, oh, you know what, you're not doing good in math, let's give you 2 math classes. That's what they did in my high school. Oh, you failed algebra? Next year, you're going to get 2 math classes. How ridiculous. Now, I get the idea. You need to do some work to build some of your background skills. But if I don't want to be in 1 math class, how in the world do you think I want to be in 2? And so I think that because we don't ask kids about what they want, what they need, even if they may not have a good answer or a way to us to do what they say they want, if we don't listen to them, I mean, it's happening in some schools, some of the schools that are making it more student-centered and not like, how do you make a school that focuses on the adults? I think schools are starting to do that more. And it took a long time. It's still taking a long time. And still some schools have a teacher at the front of the room, chalkboard or whiteboard in the front. The students are supposed to sit in the chairs all day long taking notes. I think that's how the schools looked 100 years ago. The fact that we wonder why some of them are not working should give us some reason to be like, what's wrong with you adults? What else in the world looks like it did 100 years ago? And we expect it to work well, right? Not very many things. And so I think like the fact that schools still, the teacher's in the front, everyone is copying down what the teacher says. In 2 weeks, you're going to give it back to me the same way I gave it to you. Otherwise, I'm going to mark you down. We sometimes still seem to be like in a different century with how education is supposed to look. So I think we have work to do in terms of recognizing that this is a new world that our kids are living in, our young people, and that we need to catch up because sometimes we're really far behind. That's what I think.
The good news, Ashanti, is that a lot of the things that you've described are changing in our schools. And I remember my own self as a brand new teacher. I would have hated to have had me as a teacher. I was that teacher with the rows, one-way communication, and when the principal walks by my door, I want everybody to be quiet. I'll tell you, that's not how I finished my career. The more noise, the better.
Well, I mean, to me, there's no doubt especially for boys, there's a certain physicality connected to learning. And I think, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Like, I don't think it was until COVID really hit that the idea of walk and talks for me, like I was doing all my meetings in walk and talks, and I realized I retained so much more. Because I was, Ashanti, that wiggly kid in your class that, couldn't sit still. I mean, I think I did a good job of faking it, but internally, I was just thinking about the entire time how much I just wanted to get to recess. But that brings me back again to what are some of the qualities that we want educators to be thinking about when it comes to, really fostering healthy masculinity? Or what do we need? Let's look at I think it's got to be more, but the 80% of female teachers in elementary schools that they need to know about what it's like to be a boy and what to have that kind of energy, and what are the qualities that they can enhance, they can foster, what are the ones that they have to maybe temper. Do you guys have any instincts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I go back to the way I started, and often, and I use sports because sports was my tool of choice as a phys ed teacher. But then when I left the classroom and I went on to administration, it was about creating a school environment where all kids could find a place and a sense of belonging. And it wasn't just in the gym, as you've pointed out. They needed to find a sense of belonging in different places. And in one particular school, there was a group of boys that just were longing for something, and along came the teacher who decided that they were going to start this club. And this club was a magnet for these boys. And, it brought these kids, because the classroom, that the information that the kids get in the classroom is important, but what happens in the co-curricular program, and I'm not using the word extracurricular program intentionally, because to me, they go side by side. So what happens between the bells is important, but what happens before and after the bells is equally important. And so I think, the good teachers will go and find ways to reach out and create those opportunities for boys that have not found a niche in a school. Every kid, in my view, needs to have a sense of belonging in that school, not just in the classroom, but what happens outside the bells and outside the actual instructional time. And that looks different for every kid, Jay. It's not one, size fits all. It's different. And that's my experience has told me that as a school leader, and then eventually as a system leader. And getting that message out was really critical, because I can remember in staff meetings arguing is maybe a hard, disagreeing with teachers who said, well, I'm not going to finish the curriculum. And I said, who cares? You're not going to finish the curriculum before the year ends. Is it gonna make a difference in that child's life that you haven't finished the curriculum? That kid needs other things from you that you're not providing. And it was helping those teachers transition to understand, what do those other things look like, feel like, and are going to allow those kids to connect. And I know we're talking about boys, but especially boys.
Christian, any sense in from your perspective, because you do have that wonderful experience of 1 foot in the school world and then 1 foot working with adult men?
Yeah, three things coming to mind. One, based on that question, but thinking about, I've been thinking about all boys summer camps, because I've been kind of tracking back through my memory, and I wasn't a camper at an all boys summer camp, but I've been a counselor in all boys camps. And what I'm struck by is, in those worlds, there isn't a boy, no matter how old he is, how awkward, how amazing, whatever, who doesn't have multiple male role models at every level. So that 5-year-old sees counselors that live in the bunk with the 5-year-olds that are men. There are high school kids and college counselors and men in their 40s and 83-year-old men who have been coming to camps for 63 years. And while it's a place of privilege and it assumes a certain cultural even access, but the model to me is interesting, because it isn't that boys can't find men, but in a place called school, there's a lot of reason why the pattern, 80%, 20% in elementary, et cetera. But there are places, scouts, churches, sometimes just the street, just the neighborhood, where there are men at every level. And maybe historically that was built into the fabric of the community. It was more robust. But it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that we don't use it as a model for a place called school. Like maybe there's a field trip, or maybe there's once you hit middle school, you travel to a weekend tournament or, kind of an overnight thing. And there's little micro moments, but it isn't a pattern by any means. So I've been thinking about what is it in the world of a boys' summer camp, and it's true of summer camp in general, where a young boy can both be the world's greatest airplane thrower and a dancer and fight behind the bunk with a bloody mouth and the whole thing, and dance and sing at lunch and have men teach them proper handshake and how to train and how to, eat well and work out. Like, what is it about that world? It's not Disney. It's just a place where men assemble and bring 100% of their masculinity to the table. And the boundaries are, we have these 2 weeks or 2 months, or we have a particular way that we do flag ceremony. We have these quirky rituals. But within it we have a deep investment in rituals. We have a deep investment in honoring the journey. I was your age on the same kickball field. Like, there's just all of that. Even if it's my first year, there's sort of this other imaginative world, a threshold that gets crossed. Men become fuller, even though they're there to mentor young kids or keep them out of the lake or whatever. So I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about a man who came to a hike that I led a year and a half ago, who drove a motorcycle head to toe in leather, super successful surgeon, very successful marriage, kids going off to college, all the trappings of success. Driving, I don't know what his Harley cost, but it was brand new, head to toe in a beautiful kit. I don't ride motorcycles. It's not my thing, but I could tell guys achieved something. There were a group of men in a parking lot, and he was arriving, parking, and, take the helmet off, attach it, jacket, walk. It took him close to 18 minutes to walk from the bike 40 feet to the group of men. The ritual that he brought himself through to literally take the helmet off, unzip, he was gearing himself up for battle. He came in, put a baseball hat on. Maybe he had hat head. I don't really know. For the 6 hours we were together, his bill was like this, meaning either had sunglasses and a hat down or just the hat down. At the end of the day, little by little, you saw his hat go back, and he literally was disarming himself over the course of an experience. Meaning, if I had judged his version of masculinity in any kind of social dynamic by the moment he got off the motorcycle, that would have been one narrative. If I had evaluated, judged, come to a conclusion about the way he moved to the group or stood outside the circle. He's one of those guys, you ever know that? Like, circle up, fellows, and there's always somebody that's a half a step out of the circle. They're keeping their options open, or 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They're caught, they're angled, like all that stuff is there, right? But by the end of the day, this guy, sleeves had been pulled up, hat was all the way back, big smile on his face. It took him 6.5 hours to literally change his costume, to literally allow himself to look up, not look down, to allow people to get more than a sentence of a response out of him. By the end of it, he was the embodiment of everything I would want to be as a guy. He was generous. He was laughing. He was quirky. He was confident. He was telling bad jokes, but kind of loving it. And he was asking great questions. He gave a shit about other guys. And that journey, I don't want to say it doesn't matter what we do for boys and young men, because that would be, I wouldn't feel honest about that statement. And I look around at all the other men in those places called schools, or those men in that corporate conference room, or the men that go to the Wings place, or the men who sit at the Rotary meeting. All those men lived in a world of ritual, lived in a world where, the schools are, pre-AI, stack all of the comparables generationally. When you watch men, not just young boys on TikTok or scrolling through TikTok, it's bigger than what do we do for a boy. I'm not saying it's not about that. It's a yes and. But if we get boys rightish, we don't have any kind of plan B for what happens when they become men. Because our assumption is we can just get them through the awkwardness of boyhood, the awkwardness of teenage life, the violence, the threats, the disengagement. they're going to wake up and have an epiphany at the age of 26 and feel whole. Like, so I've spent 30 years working so that schools can be places where young people can thrive. And I see adults in those conference rooms not listen to each other. Meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. One of the great problems of a place called school is people debate. They don't connect. And if we do connect, we connect because we did something together. But our currency are ideas and data and numeracy and plaques. And all of those that's not about us. That's not. So anyway, now I'm getting a little off track in terms of masculinity, but I would just say that I think a lot about where are there examples where men feel whole, and not because society's screwing them or because women have more degrees. Like, where are the places where men are refueled? There are lots of examples, but most of them aren't healthy. And so my yes and all of this is continue to support young boys, continue to bring more men into places where young boys become adolescents and young men, figure out how to connect it to our academic pursuits, connect it to this kind of realities of what a boy is experiencing away from campus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have more and more men who get to the latter third of their life and they don't have friends. Once a year, they cross paths with a guy they used to have a drink with. Their spouses become their entire social network. So that also existed long before our current malaise with young boys. But it's, I think, being exasperated now. And so like the entire male journey is not just problematic. It's hungry and longing for something, to use language you've said earlier. And I think, Dom, you represent to me, I don't know you well, but if I just go on body language and your cadence and the way Jason speaks about you, you are a man who's earned his stripes. You're a guy who has been leading for a long time, and you still give a shit. You're still all in. Like there's an energy, and I don't know if your life embodies that, but I would say you're not the typical man of a certain age either. Like there's a dwindling, and I don't mean about vitality, physical strength, or post-retirement. I just mean like the field of involvement. And so that's something I think a lot about, not the exclusion of boys or the exclusion of females, but the totality of the journey.
So if I can ask you all, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface and stuff's starting to get really good now, but I do want to be respectful of your time. But I want to ask two more questions related to that, Christian. And I want to go back and I want to just give you the opportunity to give some adjectives, some descriptive words to that point, Christian. There is a lacking there and we can broaden this probably to all of humanity, not specifically with boys, as to what meaning we're developing and what we're aiming for individually and as a culture. But specifically as we relate to manhood and that journey that you just so eloquently described. What are attributes to manhood, to masculinity, that you each want to contribute here to make folks more aware of?
Here's my quick, and I want to hear Dom and Ashanti and Jason as well. The next time you say to a guy, how you doing? And if that guy says, I'm great, how are you doing? That quick pivot. Or like, no, oh, I'm fine, but what about you? There's a lot of different ways guys do that. How are you is the question or the setup. The moment another guy, whether he's a stranger or a dear friend, says, I'm doing great, how are you? The move I typically have always done is, oh, I'm doing great. Like I immediately receive out of respect. And what I realized not that long ago was that I have no idea how he's doing. Not that I assume he's not doing well. I don't know a thing. And that moment for me has become a non-negotiable commitment that I make, even when I sound awkward as can be about it. How you doing? I'm great. Tell me more.
Mm.
What feels great right now? What matters to you? Can you tell me more about that? Like, I'm becoming almost religious about it, not as a facilitator. That's just table stakes for running a room.
Mm.
But religious about it when I walk into a store down the street and run into somebody I don't like that much. Because in that moment, I find it's like a fractal. I find everything lies right there. And I think with a boy, a classroom, a team, as a mentor, as an elder, it's exponentially powerful to do a variation of that.
Mm. So emotional honesty, I think I could capture that.
I don't even know if it's emotional. I might just get their favorite Yankee stat, but I'll know that that's what they really want to talk about.
Mm.
Yeah, I want to jump in here because I really like the question, and it's something that we talk about a lot. I think the values and attributes that I want young men to know, definitely when I was in the classroom and now that I work on the outside, is that you can be kind, you can be caring, you can be loving, you can be gentle. And I do that through a story of telling them that when I was little, I was super emotional, a little boy in Oakland, California, where the rule of being man meant you suck it up, man up. All the things they told me that was not enough, that I was not enough to fit into. And so I became a little fighter. I became an elementary kid who was always in trouble, fighting all the time. And I said, I'm so glad that that society didn't chase those qualities in me, that even though in elementary school, you would have not thought Ashanti was very kind because I was trained that that's not respected. You would not thought that he was caring, he was loving. At home, I had those responsibilities, but in the school, playground, terrorizing. And so I realized that I want them to see that you can be a person who doesn't get taken advantage of and not be a person who is harming others to keep people from taking advantage of you. And I think that those values of that I'm so grateful that I still have in me. And I met many people along, growing up that took those emotions away and they stayed away. And they became adults who either had to numb everything away with substances. And so I think that for me, the values are asking those questions, how are you doing, and making time for a real answer and letting them know that, hey, it's not the right time to talk about it. I'm here for you when you are. And that I'll be careful, not to tell you I'm great when I'm actually not great. And I'm like, well, I'm okay. I'm hanging in here, and I'm quick to turn it back on them because I don't think they really want to hear the real story for my answer. But so how can I find more people in my life that I can be more honest with and be like, man, today's one of those days that and when they try and over positivize my response, not to let them do it and say, no, actually, it's actually really tough right now. Yeah, I know that maybe soon is going to get over it. But right now, I'm really feeling it. I'm really feeling the pressure and realizing that I may make them uncomfortable. And that's okay sometimes too. Not intentionally, but not to let them gloss over the fact that I said I'm having a tough day. Oh, it'll be okay. Don't worry. You'll get through it. It doesn't feel like it right now. It doesn't feel like I'm going to get through it. It's really rough, but I get that you don't want to continue this conversation. I'm good. No hard feelings. It's all good. Right. And so those qualities are attributes that I really value. So thanks for the question.
Mr. Scuglia.
Yeah, I'm listening to both gentlemen reflect on qualities and some really great comments. For me, I think, again, I'm going to default to the rugby because we have some general stereotypes about the game and the qualities that are required to be able to play this game, tough and all this other stuff. But for me, it was really important that the boys were able to be humble and show humility and at the same time to be vulnerable. And this happened quite a bit because I'm not being boastful here, but we had really good teams. And it wasn't because I was a good coach, but I had some really phenomenal athletes who learned their craft of playing the sport.
It was
And-
both, Dom. It was both.
And so what ended up happening, we would always end up being at the provincial championships called OFSA. And, our teams did well. And when we lost, and that's one thing we never did, was win a gold medal, the emotions that came out, and the boys were crying and I was crying. And it was because we had invested all of this time together to build this community of love and trust and hope. And we fell short. And sir, I've never cried even at my grandfather's funeral. I'm crying here. I said, it's okay. It's okay. And then after talking about that vulnerability and being able to say, it's okay, because the world still is going to continue the next day, and you're going to be okay when this is all said and done. And there was a lesson that we needed to learn here. And we'll take that lesson. It'll make us better, stronger people.
Wonderful. And if I could just add one thing to that, to all of these perspectives, is I also do think there is ample space for men to lean into being protectors for those that are more vulnerable, to those that you can protect yourself. I think that's that gets caught up in male bravado sometimes and becomes aggressive and punitive, but that's not the kind of aggression I'm talking about. I think there's ample opportunity for men to lean into that. I think we can call it almost innate desire to protect those around you, and to do it in a way that is good for the individual as well as the others that you're protecting. I think Scott Galloway is one of the guys that talks about that a lot. He connects it to physical fitness, which I also believe is something really healthy to lean into. So I just wanted to add that. Last question, gentlemen. And I think I'm going to ask you at some point to do a version 2 of this, because I feel like we're just starting to cook here. If you could give one or two, but let's limit it. Let's try to be as precise as we can. Piece of advice, recommendations to school leaders, to school districts, and you can form this in a wish that you would want fulfilled for the school systems. What would that be? And let me just start here with Dom, because this is kind of your area. Let's start there.
Yeah, that's such a great question, but a very important question, because I think in order for the leaders to be successful, they need to understand that that child that's in front of them didn't wake up that morning and come to school, maybe with a lunch, maybe without a lunch, to say, I'm coming to wreck your day. I'm here today to make your day miserable. And I think when we as educators can get to a point where we can do some of the things that my colleagues have been suggesting in the last hour and a half, to drill down and ask that question, not just how's your day going, but how is your day really going? Like, what happened today? You're so out of character. Did something happen at home? Did you have a disagreement with your girlfriend, or your boyfriend? It's important, I think, that we go beyond the superficial and we really try to get into that relationship where I care, I want to know what's going on with you today. And once we are on that same page, I know as the adult how I need to adjust what I need to do to make your day livable today.
Christian.
I love all of that, Dom. I'm thinking about the simple act of asking a boy to show you how to do something. Whether it's Legos or playing Roblox or how to throw sticks at a tree. There's something magical about when a thing a boy is going to do to waste time, or because he's geeking out, or he's just hardcore proud of himself. And that young boy is asked by a man How do you do that? Show me.
Mm.
It comes from a good place. That boy is 100% available for the other things that were there to help serve and guide.
I love it. So let the boys lead in the schools. Ashanti, fittingly, sir, the last word goes to you, my friend.
Oh, man. Well, thank you for the question. And I would tell school leaders, listen, for 22 years, I've been asking questions and being curious about what's happening with young men in schools. And over 22 years, here's what I've found. If you can realize that there's so much more to each of your students than you can see by looking at them, than you can see by looking at the grades in the grade book, if you're willing to take this tool that we've been refining for 22 years to invite all of your students to make a mask, 3 steps, anonymous, 3 words on the front, 3 words on the back, you will learn so much more than you could ever imagine by just their raw words of the things that they're letting you see and the things that they're not letting you see. And those words can absolutely transform not only how your staff sees the students, how you see your staff and what they're having to deal with in their classroom that is not showing up on the outside. And I think those things, that tool that we've been trying to create and refine can transform schools. It can transform lives. And then absolutely it will transform education. So that's my advice to any of these educators, administrators.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure I share that with them in the notes of this podcast. With that, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Glad to be with you, man.
Really, really good today.
Appreciate y'all, boys.
You too, brother.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. Until next time.